Welcome in, LSU fans, back to the Go 24/7 podcast. My name is Bryce Koon alongside Sonny Shipp. And Sonny, we appreciate you hopping on as, man, it's crazy to think, first off, that we're sitting here at November 14th. We're under a month away from National Signing Day. Football season has flown by, and it's going to be an interesting, I guess we could say, an interesting next couple of weeks as LSU tries to finalize some things with this impressive 2025 class.
Yeah, man, we're actually under 3 weeks. And so, yeah, that cranks it up another notch, right? But yeah, exciting time of the year, and it's a different feeling with this recruiting cycle
Mhm.
because with the NCAA calendar, with the calendar, the way that it got pushed up from a recruiting perspective, you're seeing a total different recruiting approach. No in-home visits. Normally, this time of the year, the coaches are getting ready to make that stretch run where they got 3 weeks to go on in-home visits. Now, with the early signing period starting on December 4th, there is no time for in-home visits.
Yeah.
You basically, if you want an in-home visit, then you need to get that kid to campus.
Mhm.
And, that's where the importance of these unofficial visits come in. And, a visit weekend like the Alabama weekend where LSU was able to get a lot of kids on campus. I'm sure some took issue with the results and the way they came, but it gives coaches a chance to be able to have that face time with players, with parents, with coaches, mentors, trainers, whatever, whoever they need to get to. And, obviously, when you look at it from an LSU angle, last weekend for the Alabama game, you could arguably say, the two biggest official visitors, or two of the biggest official visitors that LSU hosted all season, was
Yeah.
in Bryce Underwood and Jahkeem Stewart. So just a different feel to this recruiting cycle, and it's going to be I'm anxious to see how the back half of it works. How many kids actually don't sign early? They push it back late, to where you can see more of the old recruiting process that we're used to where coaches in January, they do make those visits. They do get out on the road. And so it's an exciting time for all recruiting junkies like me and like you. And it's just a fun time of the year.
Yeah, man. I was telling someone the other day, I do miss, when I was in high school, refreshing 24/7 sports to see who had signed on that, Wednesday in February. It's so different. It's so different now. You
See, here's the
mentioned
difference though. When I was in high school, I was having to call 1-800 numbers.
there was no
So
refreshing the internet.
just to shine how much of a different, yeah. Who was the dude who invented the internet? Al Gore gets the credit, I think. Yeah, he wasn't even thinking about the internet back when I was in high school.
Hey, it's different. It's different for sure. I wanted to get your take on the Alabama weekend. Glenn and I were down on the sideline pregame. It was really a who's who for that Alabama LSU game in terms of not just visitors, but a lot of LSU celebrities in terms of these kids getting to see a lot of big names, on the sideline. But obviously, like you kind of hinted at, I mean, the result was nowhere near what LSU wanted. How much of, and I think there's a balance here, how much of that result can be used as a negative recruiting tool for other schools, and how much of it is a point for LSU of saying, hey, we really do need you here, and here's proof. How does this staff go about that, and does that result have a negative effect on these guys, or are the relationships deep enough to where, of course, they would have liked to see a win, but they're still kind of bought in?
Well, other coaches, they don't need something that they can show a visual of, something that they can explain to negative recruit, because college coaches, they'll pull stuff out of their rear end just to try to get into a kid's head, try to get
Yeah.
into a parent's head. This season of the year is called flip season, and it's also the time of the year to where counter offers are made. Offers are anteed up, the NIL offers, and you see school programs. I hate to say schools, but you see programs, collectives, really kind of circling back and saying, okay, hey, you wasn't interested. Now look at what we're doing here. Oh, by
Yeah.
the way, now we can offer you, you know, $3,000 more a month, or whatever,
Yeah.
whatever they need to do to sweeten the pot. So that's what coaches really have to combat this time of the year. And as far as the Alabama game itself, I mean, look, you can look at it two ways. A guy like DJ Pickett looks at it and says, man, you know what? I've got a chance to come in here and play early. Guy like Bryce Underwood looks at it and says, well, maybe that QB1 position is a little more up for grabs than we thought it was going to be a few weeks ago when Nussmeier was lighting it up and setting the world on fire. And so it really just boils down to who it is and what they're looking for. Are you looking for short-term gratification? You looking for long-term gratification? Kind of like the whole NIL process in general. Are you looking for that upfront number that just basically to where we buy you, or are you looking for that long-term development to where you have a chance to increase your brand, to grow your brand, to reach out outside of the collective and get some outside endorsements? And, we've seen LSU players do that in the past. I mean, obviously Jaden Daniels had a bunch of outside endorsements. Garrett Nussmeier went into this season with some outside endorsements. We've seen John Deere, we've seen Get Gordon and all of those. So from that perspective, it's really, I think when you look back at the Alabama game, it really gives coaches, I guess you could say, more ammunition, if anything. It kind of lines it up to where coaches can say, well, look, BK, they brought BK in, and this was supposed to be the year, and there's already talk about some people wanting him, questioning the hire and things like that. So there's so much outside, like Brian Kelly talks about this a lot. Keep the outside noise out of the locker room. And right now there's a lot of outside noise with the way LSU has played the last 2 weeks. Now, you want to quell some of those concerns. You want to quiet some of that chatter. You go handle your business in Florida this weekend.
Yeah.
And I think recruits, are, they have a different philosophy. Most of them do when it comes to games like that. Because let's face it, unless you play for a program like Bishop Gorman, like, some of these programs in Louisiana, Edna Carr, that are used to going 10-0 in the regular season, they're not used to losing. Well, there's very few teams out there like that, and so 99% of the kids who was there has gotten waxed like that before. They know what it feels. They know what it's like to look at a game and be like, man, that was just absolutely horrible. So I think the negative effect and the negative fallout from the loss is not nearly what fans like to make it out to be. But what you have to avoid is stacking those up. And right now, LSU has 2 bad losses in a row. You go down to the Florida and you lay an egg this weekend, then I think coaches will really have some ammunition to put inside these recruits' heads to try to create some doubts. But if LSU goes down to Florida and they handle their business, then you look at Vanderbilt, you look at Oklahoma, it's very easy for Brian Kelly and that staff to point to, look, we have a very good chance of finishing 9-3. We're not out of the playoff race quite yet, although we need a lot of help. And the 10 wins is certainly attainable. Now, 10 wins is not that's not the golden bar that you want to reach at a place like LSU. But when you're coming off of what Brian Kelly was left with, I think you have to look at 3 consecutive 10-win seasons and say, okay, we're on the right track. Now, what's it going to take to push us to that next level? Yeah. And I think to get to that next level, LSU has to do a little bit of a better job in addressing the needs through the transfer portal. And I know that there's some questions about, wanting to buy players and things like that. But look, man, after Ole Miss beat Georgia, Ole Miss Collective started pulling in a ton of money.
Yeah.
They started putting in a lot of money now that they can throw at, they're throwing at recruits. They're going to throw in the transfer portal because they're seeing tangible results from spending all that money by going out, getting a Walter Nolan, getting the Prince kid out of Florida, getting these other high profile guys that they had to go out and pay for. And so, I think that's what LSU has to figure out, and they have to come up with I think that you need to get a better plan for attacking the portal this time around than they did the last time around.
Yeah, and I was talking with someone the other day. They said, well, Bryce, when do you think I asked me, when do you think these guys really start looking at it? And I can't speak from direct sources at LSU, but Sonny, I think you, me, all of us know that, there's GAs, there's assistants that are creating big boards of guys that, hey, if said player enters the portal, we're going to go after him. Those things are created well into with all the relationships that these guys have with players. I mean, it brings up a whole idea of tampering, but I do agree with just and not just LSU. There's staffs across the country that are trying to build big boards of here's our needs and here's guys that we expect to or hope enter the portal, and we're going to try to go after them. You obviously released a confidence signing meter. Encourage people to go get that VIP subscription and check it out. Glenn and I were talking about it the other day, just in terms of good content, and that's definitely there. Sonny, I don't want to, break it wide open here on the podcast, but just to tease some people, to maybe go over and check out that article. Who are some of the names that you're looking at? Obviously, Derek Meadows comes to mind with him flirting with some other schools. And look, kids are going to take their opportunities. But who are some of the names that maybe watch in this class that are currently committed that are being courted by other programs? And maybe we see, some smoke and mirrors as we get closer to signing day.
Yeah, you mentioned Derek Meadows. 2 weeks ago he visited Michigan. Last weekend he visited Notre Dame. LSU is supposed to get him in on that final weekend before the ESP for the Oklahoma game, and so they have to get him in that weekend. If they don't get him in that weekend, I don't think they're. I think the chances of him signing with LSU are so slim that I don't even know what they would be. The Bryce Underwood effect is big right there, but someone framed it best on the board to where they said, I feel like Derek Meadows likes Bryce Underwood more than he likes LSU. And I can see that. I've talked to numerous sources who have felt like that Underwood held a big piece to Meadows sticking, but that Meadows, you've got some kids who are born leaders. You got some kids in the middle, and then you got some kids who are followers. And I think Derek Meadows probably falls into that latter category when it comes to Bryce Underwood. Because, I mean, look, it's like, the Michigan talk, for instance, I think that Underwood probably had a lot to do with that indirectly. Not that he was trying to get Meadows to visit Michigan or anything like that, but just because of the smoke between the two schools. So he's one. Obviously, I think Devin Harper is another big one, the big offensive lineman out of Shreveport, out of Calvary Baptist. I think Ole Miss is definitely working hard to complete that flip. And, when we go back and when we talk about the NIL and that the money that I believe the Ole Miss collective is called the Grove, right?
I believe, I think it is.
Yeah. Well, we'll just call them their collective. And, that went over Georgia. I mentioned it earlier. That went over Georgia. That got boosters and that got the donors excited. And, so Devin Harper is definitely one to watch. And Tyler Miller is another one, another big offensive lineman. He's out of Mississippi. He's someone that Lane Kiffin has kind of put a lot of emphasis on.
Yeah.
And they've been courting him ever since he committed to LSU. But now you get into that sense to where you're 3 weeks away from signing day. You've got, some sweetened up NIL offers. And I think, I think that he's another one that when you look at the potential flips, I think he's another one that you circled. I'm not ready to rule out CJ Jim Coyley only because I'm anxious to see if Vanderbilt, tries to build off of this success and really comes at him and says, look, man, you can be a cornerstone of this class, and really starts to put that sell on, because I'm really surprised that Vanderbilt hasn't done that yet. When I mentioned a few weeks ago about Jim Coyley and Vanderbilt, it was like it was kind of like more like him having interest in them, and their interest wasn't really reciprocated. So, and to be anxious to see how that part falls out. Obviously, DJ Pickett, that's another one. He's supposed to be visiting Florida this weekend. And then, but I think Miami's the bigger worry there. Look, I think he's going to Florida this weekend because it gives him another chance to see LSU.
Yeah.
You get to, you're not spurning one of the hometown teams quite as much. But I think if anyone's going to flip DJ, I think it would probably be Miami. But I
Yeah.
think those are the guys you really have to look at. And look, that might be LSU fans might look at that and say, man, that's a lot of bad news. No, there's a lot of good news too, because I think LSU really helped itself with Bryce Underwood this weekend on that official visit. That was a big concern going into this weekend. You absolutely do not want to lose a guy you've had committed for, almost a year now,
Yeah.
and who you've has kind of been the cornerstone of your class right there. So those are the guys that I'm probably the most concerned about right now. And you can toss Mike Tyler into that category too,
Yeah.
the 3-star tight end. I mean, he lives 15 minutes from South Carolina's campus. He's right there in Columbia. Like Vandy, the Gamecocks are on a roll right now. They're having a really good season. There's a lot of momentum that Shane Beamer's creating right there. They're making a strong run at him. I think he's another one that if I had to pick whether he sticks or flips, I would think that he flips at this point.
Yeah, no, and I remember I was joking with somebody. When I was in Columbia for the LSU South Carolina game, my hotel was farther away than Mike Tyler's high school was from Williams-Brice Stadium, and it makes sense. I mean, look, Shane Beamer and that staff, they got a marquee win, last week over A&M, and obviously, like you mentioned with Ole Miss, a lot of NIL dollars flowing in for these programs. And Jim Coley, going back to him, I remember when I talked to him over the summer when he committed. Academics is a very high priority. If folks remember, Stanford was really high on his list, and a lot of people kind of looked at that like, really? And, but hey, look, Stanford, one of the best academic institutions at the FBS level in the country. It would make sense for Vanderbilt to turn up the heat, as we get closer and closer to signing day. Sonny, guy that everyone wants to know. He was on campus. I wanted to get your thoughts on this. Jahkeem Stewart. I mean, obviously, we kind of had known this reclassification was going to come for some time. Obviously, Ohio State, Oregon are programs that are really involved in his recruitment. He does make the visit. So you could probably argue this is about as, outside of Bryce Underwood, this is about as must-win of a battle that LSU has to win. I know Frank Wilson's heavily involved here. Just kind of give me your thoughts on where LSU stands with Jahkeem Stewart, and I won't make you put him on the confidence meter, but just your overall thoughts between the Tigers and obviously that really, really good defensive lineman.
Well, I'll tell you what, if I did my confidence meter, and I'm going to work one up on the targets probably later today, try to get up before the end of the week. I think that Jahkeem Stewart, look, after his LSU visit, there wasn't anyone beating their chest from the people who I've spoke to saying like, oh man, we blew it out the water. He's definitely coming here or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I think a reason for that is because of the Ohio State, the Oregon, the USC talk.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you've got those visits coming up. USC is not this weekend, but next weekend, and then Ohio State is the last weekend before the start of the early signing period. And I think he's a guy that you look at and you say, okay, should I be concerned or should I not be concerned? I think you should be concerned. And I'm not saying that he's definitely going out of state. I really think that he's still caught in the decision of, okay, do I want to stay in state or do I want to go see something new? He got out and visited all these schools when he was young, when he was ineligible to even play his freshman year because of relocating schools. He got out to start seeing a lot of schools then. And I think that opened his eyes to something outside of Louisiana. And, there's a lot of talk about Oregon, but I still think I'm still in the camp that Ohio State is going to be a real threat. And I think in the end, it's going to come down to Ohio State and Oregon if he decides to go out of state. Obviously, if he decides to stay in state, it would be LSU. But man, it's hard to bet against Frank Wilson with a kid that he has put so much time and effort into, a kid out of New Orleans who was at St. Aug, who was at Frank's alma mater, and just someone who the way that Frank Wilson has recruited Jahkeem Stewart almost feels like going back to 2014 with Leonard Fournette.
Hmm.
So much emphasis was placed on it. You had so many ties, you had so many connections. And I know people will look and say, yeah, but what about in that same class, Speedy Noyle, who was, related to
Sure.
Frank in a long way, ended up spurning LSU and going to Texas A&M. Gerald Willis went to, was it Florida? Florida. I
Florida.
knew he
Yeah.
ended up at Miami, but I had to think
Yeah.
about who was first. He was another case to where they put a lot of time and effort into it, but they didn't end up getting. And so, it's really one of those cases to where you don't want to bet against Frank, and you want to give him the benefit of the doubt. And I think he deserves the benefit of the doubt when
Yeah.
it comes to a kid like that. But if it comes to a situation of should I be concerned, I think you should be, just because I think that the chances of him leaving are just as good as him staying in state.
Yeah.
So
And I
that
was talking.
confidence meter would be maybe 51%.
Well, until you mentioned Ohio State, Larry Johnson, their defensive line coach, we all know the history he has of playing and then obviously coaching. I mean, Ohio State, when you look at NFL numbers, I mean, they have produced and they have something they can show as well. And like you mentioned, it's interesting when you talk about a kid, able to take visits and, in-state kids saying, hey, there's some really good programs outside of that. It's not a knock against LSU. It's just something different that kids get to see when they go on these visits. Sonny, let's wrap it up with here, because we've had this question kind of matriculate on the board, a couple of different ways and a couple of different times. Obviously, the SEC says, "Hey, we're not doing the 105. We're going to bring this back down to 85." How much of a curveball is this for this staff? I mean, there's some names on this commitment list that I'm starting to wonder, do these guys sign with LSU due to this? I mean, do we have to, are there some hard conversations that have to be had between staff member and recruit? What's your thought process on this from the SEC? And then how does this affect LSU specifically as they kind of look to round out this 2025 class? And I think we've seen some numbers where you, me, and Glenn were all like, okay, that's a result of them going to 105. How hard is it to come back down and crack back down to 85?
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough, and the staff shouldn't have been caught off guard, because the SEC office has been telling, says that it's been telling programs all along that be prepared for the 85, be prepared for the 85. We're not sure if we're going to jump to the 105 yet, and it really doesn't make sense. It's almost a situation to where the SEC hamstrung itself, where other schools, you see it in the transfer portal. The SEC is the only one who has this rule that if you're not in the portal by I think it's February, early February,
Yeah, I think it's
something
first
like
or
that.
second
Yeah,
week.
yeah. It basically limits your options tremendously if you enter the portal in the spring, because now you're looking at a situation to where if you're leaving LSU, you can automatically take 16 programs out of the equation.
Yeah.
And that's all the SEC schools. And
Yeah.
so I really don't understand the SEC reasoning. I get that they don't, if the House versus NCAA settlement falls through and it doesn't go to 105 and all of that, then they don't want to have to strip away scholarships. I can understand that reasoning. But if I'm Brian Kelly, if I'm Scott Woodward, I'm jumping up and down and I'm screaming, because guess what? Guess what Oregon's going to do? Guess what Michigan's going to do? Guess what Notre Dame's going to do? Guess what those powers outside of the SEC are going to do? They're going to use that 105 limit. And back to LSU, they entered the season, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, so they may not be completely accurate, but they entered the season with 2 under the 85 limit, and so that gave them a little bit of room right there. But when you look at everyone coming back with the true freshman class, if you go down the roster and you look at everybody, I've got them over, I want to say it was either 10 or 11 over the 85 man limit. So now you're looking at a situation to where if you're LSU and you've got some needs you need to address in the portal, let's say you want to bring in 8 guys. Well, now you got to lose 18 or 19.
Yeah.
And I know that's a part of college football now and everything, but still, I can't look at that roster and say, okay, trim the fat, the fat, without getting rid of some players who I think still have a chance, to be a dude,
Yeah.
And so I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't understand it. I mean, to me, it doesn't make sense. It's, if you're given a parameter to play by, it's kind of like, okay, you got a football field. A football field is what, 52 yards wide?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you say, okay, well, we're only gonna use 45 of that 52.
Don't
What
change it up
sense
on
would
it.
that make?
Yeah.
It's 7 yards over here outside of the hash. That's out of bounds. So
Yeah.
I don't get it. I don't get it. But I also want, I do get it in a way with Greg Sankey and the SEC. They want to be the kingpin. They want to be the ones who set the bar, and they hope that others follow. I don't think others are going to follow them in this case, because there's, and I could be wrong, so please correct me, but it seems like there's a lot more traction towards that settlement going
Mhm.
through than it is completely falling apart. Or have I missed something that, to where all of a sudden it's in jeopardy?
It sounds like it's tracking like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it seems like it's trending the same way that it's always been trending.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like it's taken a turn or anything. So
No.
I don't like it. I don't really like it, and I agree with you. I think there's some kids in the class that you look at, and you say, and I go back to last year. Look at last year's class. LSU signed 4 corners. Now,
Mm.
Mike Turner got moved from wide receiver to cornerback, and Juwan Johnson, who knows where he's going to end up at. But you've got a big cornerback class coming in right here too. So
Yeah.
how many corners how many corners can you have if you're living by this 85 man rule? And
Yeah.
so I think there's I think that, especially on the defensive side of the ball, you had an entire new defensive staff that came in after signing day. They went through the spring, they went through this season. Now they have an idea of who they think can play. They have an idea of who they think cannot play at this level. And
Yeah.
so that class right there, is that class and that side of the ball are the two that I'm going to be most interested in when it comes to attrition and potential incoming gains out of the portal.
No, I'm with you there. I think that when you look at that cornerback room, I mean, it's just going to create an interesting logjam because you had to go get more players there. You already have a number of players there, and look, I mean, you've got guys that I think will be entering their junior season that might look elsewhere just for opportunities. But this freshman class, Sonny, I mean, the class that's currently on campus, it feels like there's some names on that list that could they be pushed out the door? I don't want to speculate, but there are just some names where, like I said, I don't know where you can really go and say we can go trim the fat here. You might have to cut some kids who have some real potential that could contribute at LSU at some point in their career. And doesn't it feel like a training camp roster? And it feels like you got to cut it down to 53 when you used to watch Hard Knocks on HBO, and you got to cut it down all those tough conversations. It's not. It's a different world, the college football, that's for sure. So be interesting.
And I think, Lane Kiffin says a lot of stupid things, and Lane Kiffin says a lot of things that just make you say, "Oh man." But he Wednesday, I think it was on the SEC teleconference call. He talked about how stupid it is to have a transfer window when teams are still playing. And he
Oh,
said, could you imagine the NFL, the MLB, or NBA starting free agency in the playoffs, in the postseason?
just
I
be
mean, how
crazy.
stupid is that? How stupid is that?
Yeah.
And I understand that you have, that you have a recruiting calendar that you have to bring into the situation. You have a lot of
Mhm.
other things that you have to consider, but yeah, it's kind of baffling. It's kind of baffling, and it kind of makes you wonder, like, okay, why don't they go back to the way it was, to where the portal opens right after the national championship is decided? You
Yeah,
know,
that's fair.
why not do it then? But then I get it, because then it limits kids being able to leave and
And
get there for the
enroll.
spring and things like that. So there's a lot of things I think that you have to work out, but I think you also have to look at it from the, you know, which lens are you looking through? Are you looking through the lens that you want to make it the best for the kids looking to transfer, or do you want to look through it through the lens that makes the best situation for the teams who are trying to finish their season?
Yeah.
because you're trying to please two sides. You're trying to please two sides of the coin, and it's a tricky situation that they're going to have to figure out. But the whole transfer portal, NIL madness, and everything like that. I mean, it's been a complete cluster from the start,
Mhm.
and I think that I think at the end of the day that the House versus NCAA settlement, that it's going to change very little when it comes to NIL, because you're still going to have these NIL. I mean, the only thing it's going to do is it's going to put more money in the kids' pockets.
Yeah, that's fair. That's
You
fair.
know,
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting, and LSU is gonna be smack dab in the middle of it. This offseason, trying to find a way to find 85 scholarship players and move forward in the 2025 season. But like Sonny mentioned, a lot still to play for in terms of recruiting and that crazy outside chance. Too much math for my liking, Sonny, to figure out how you're going to get to
and that's
Atlanta.
another good podcast.
Oh, dude,
That's another good podcast. Is
Glenn
looking at
and I talked
holes
about.
to
Do we do a
fill.
whole one where can I get a whiteboard back here and I'm writing out different scenarios or something like that? I don't. That's too much math for me, man. I'm
I
done with sport.
love that idea. I love that idea.
It's awesome stuff,
Because
and
now I'm sitting there looking at that instead of trying to remember in this,
exactly.
early onset of dementia that this old man is kicking in on.
It's going to be interesting. Going to be interesting, no doubt about it. And make sure you stay tuned to the Go 24/7 podcast. Head over to LSU's 24/7 site. We got a great job. You can get a membership over there. Get it for someone for Christmas. Get it for a holiday, because it's going to be crazy over the next month and a half. We'd love to have you join us over there on the message boards and join the Go 24/7 family as well. You can click that link down below. And we appreciate you tuning in, whether that's on YouTube or you're listening on all your podcast platforms. My name is Bryce Koon. That is Sonny Shipp. And we will catch you next time here on the Go 24/7 podcast.